In 1977, a Southern England news broadcast was hijacked by this strange voice claiming to be from the Ashtar Galactic Command. In 2015, a live Oklahoma City traffic report caught this fast-moving glowing object flying across the sky, and in 1992, a creepy BBC special caused mass panic and thousands of complaints before it was banned for over a decade. These are moments on live TV that scientists can't explain. So in 1977, during a regular news broadcast in southern England, the audio suddenly cut out. The picture went all fuzzy, and there was this buzzing noise. Then a strange metallic voice cut in, claiming to be Vrillon from the Ashtar Galactic Command. And for nearly 6 minutes it delivered this bizarre message, warning humanity to stop fighting, destroy its weapons, and prepare for a great awakening. It also told viewers that they were being watched and guided by beings from other worlds. The station was completely unaware of what was going on until people started calling in. Engineers figured out someone had hijacked the signal by targeting a specific transmitter that rebroadcast signals from another tower, basically exploiting a weak point in the system. But even still, they never found out who actually did this. Whoever it was, though, needed some serious technical skill and equipment. People have analyzed every part of this message. Some say it was just a prank, others think it was someone who genuinely wanted to put this message out there. And then there are those who actually think this message was coming from somewhere up in space. I'd love to believe that, but I don't. Back in March of 2015, Coco 5 News in Oklahoma City was running a normal early morning traffic report. Nothing exciting, just the usual aerial feed from their Grand Casino Skycam out in Shawnee. But then, out of nowhere, this glowing white object zipped across the screen at lightning speed. It was super fast, too fast to be a plane, and the movement doesn't look like a drone either. The news anchors didn't even notice it live. Viewers caught it first and started flooding the station with questions. To their credit, the news station didn't ignore it. They re-aired the footage and posted it online, asking the public to help figure out what it was. Problem is, nobody really could. It wasn't a meteor, those fall, they don't fly sideways at a steady height. It wasn't a bug on the lens either, the light shifts as it moves and you could see it behind distant clouds. It wasn't a military or commercial aircraft as far as anyone could tell, and it didn't match any scheduled flights. Despite being caught live on air and analyzed frame by frame, nobody's ever nailed down exactly what this thing was. Alright, this is an interesting one, because it's not what happened on TV that was the mysterious part, but what was going on with viewers while the broadcast was happening. So in 1992, the BBC aired a Halloween special called Ghostwatch. This was a fake documentary about a haunted house in North London. The thing is, most viewers didn't realize it was scripted. The show was presented like any other live broadcast, except the crew was investigating a poltergeist called Pipes. Viewers at home would catch glimpses of the ghostly figure of Pipes in the background of shots, and there would be weird audio glitches. On top of that, of course, the subject matter was just unsettling on its own. The atmosphere felt real. Too real, and as the broadcast went on, people started calling in to report their own paranormal experiences. Others were convinced that the show had invited an actual spirit into their homes. The BBC got tens of thousands of complaints. One girl reportedly entered a catatonic state after watching it. People were legitimately freaking out, even though the show had a brief disclaimer at the start. If you happened to tune in after it, you'd have no way of knowing that this was staged. The format fooled a lot of people, including some of the presenters who weren't even told everything that would happen. Scientists and psychologists later studied the public's reaction to the show, calling it a rare case of mass suggestion triggered by media. The show only aired once and the BBC banned it for a decade. In 1959, a few thousand people in Michigan were trying to watch the World Series when their screen just went black for the entire first 3 games. Turned out it wasn't a tech failure. A former station employee named Harold Lindgren had snuck into a relay station miles out of town and jammed the signal by shoving steel wool into a pipe in a transmitter. He'd been fired a few weeks earlier and wanted to get back at the boss who let him go. He called the whole thing a diabolical plot. And to be fair, kind of was. He drove out at night, climbed a fence, sabotaged the equipment with stuff he'd just grabbed from his kitchen sink. Technicians from Chicago and Green Bay had been brought in to figure out what happened. When police finally tracked him down, Lindgren admitted to everything. He didn't really seem to care about hiding it, just wanted to make a point. In 1980, WSB TV in Atlanta had a bizarre incident during a kids' cartoon block. Oh boy. The Plastic Man Comedy Adventure Show was on. Yeah. That show that we all remember. Well, right in the middle of a commercial break, the screen suddenly cut to a still photo of a woman for a couple seconds, nude. The image had been spliced into a Georgia Forestry Commission ad. It seemed like an accident, but apparently it wasn't. The station's general manager, Fred Barber, later admitted that 2 master control operators had done this on purpose. They were the guys who handled overnight sign-offs and morning startup duties. And apparently one of them liked splicing random things onto tapes, and this time no one on the station's morning staff caught it before it aired. The operators were fired immediately. Even though it was over in seconds, it caused a huge stir. Because, well, first of all, the time slot, worst time and place to show a naked woman on TV, and this was a major station. So the rules around tape handling and sign-on and sign-off procedures were tightened. On January 4th, 2000, the Teletubbies was playing on the GMA network in the Philippines. On this particular morning, for just a few seconds, the screen cut to a photo of actress Rosanna Rosas with her chest exposed. Teletubbies was weird enough as is. This was the last thing these young viewers needed to see. Obviously, this immediately triggered a warning from the country's media review board. GMA later explained that the whole thing was a mistake caused by an employee who was fixing a computer at the time. Apparently, he pressed the wrong button while trying to help with some system repairs, and somehow that caused the wrong image to flash on air. That sounds hard to believe. I mean, that really does sound like the excuse you give when you just don't know what to say. Oh, I pressed the wrong button, and then it was boobs. Anyway, they insisted nobody did this as a prank. The network apologized and promised to tighten up controls. The employee was never named. Wasn't much follow-up on whether he kept his job, but it's definitely freaked out parents and probably gave a few kids a weird memory of Teletubbies. They probably grew up thinking this was some bizarre fever dream. On October 8th, 2022, in the middle of a live newscast on Iran's state-run TV, the broadcast suddenly cut to a masked figure and a black screen showing Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei surrounded by flames with a digital target on his head. It only lasted 12 seconds, but this was very loud and clear. The screen also showed photos of 4 women who had recently died during the Mahsa Amini protests, along with the phrase "Women, Life, Freedom," repeated over and over. Mahsa Amini was a 22-year-old woman who died after being arrested by Iran's morality police for supposedly not wearing her headscarf the right way. Her death quickly set off protests all across the country. The group behind this hack called themselves Adalat Ali, a hacktivist collective that had already leaked internal government documents in the past. State TV anchors were clearly rattled when the feed returned. I mean, just look at this news anchor's face. People inside and outside Iran shared clips of the hack almost immediately, and it spread fast online. No one really knows how deep the investigation went or if anyone got caught, but even though it was under 15 seconds, this was one of the most direct, high-profile hacks ever pulled off on live Iranian television. Now, for obvious reasons, I can't actually find footage of these Soviet pirate broadcasting hacks. I mean, it was the Soviet Union, everything was very locked down, but back in the Soviet Union, where the government completely controlled radio and TV, pirate broadcasting wasn't done as a prank. This was one of the only ways to hear anything outside what the government wanted you to hear. As early as 1966, there were reports of a teenager in Kaluga hijacking the radio to spread fake news about a nuclear war breaking out with the US. That kind of hoax was rare, but actual hijackers were popping up constantly, especially during the 70s and 80s. They'd jump onto relay stations during programming gaps and broadcast their own music, their own opinions. Sometimes the state would lash back in newspapers, calling them radio hooligans and accusing them of jamming frequencies needed by emergency aircraft. Whether that part was true or just scare tactics, isn't totally clear. I imagine there was a lot of exaggeration going on. Oh, there are even hotlines for citizens to report pirate signals, but these underground broadcasters kept showing up, proving how desperate the people were for anything that wasn't just government propaganda. A Las Vegas man calling himself Prophet Yahweh claimed that he could summon UFOs on demand. And in 2005, a local news crew filmed two bright spherical objects appearing in the sky right after he prayed. In 2009, BBC viewers watched live as a strange white light zipped across the Millennium Bridge in Newcastle. And in 2013, hackers hijacked the emergency alert system across several US states, broadcasting a warning that zombies were rising from their graves. These are more moments in live TV that scientists can't explain. In 2005, ABC 13 Action News in Las Vegas covered a man named Ramon Watkins, who referred to himself as Prophet Yahweh. He claimed that he could summon UFOs just by praying, and said he would prove it live on camera. Well, ABC sent a reporter, Mike Dello Stritto, and a cameraman to meet him near Lake Mead. The prophet prayed, and within moments, something strange appeared in the sky. It was two bright spherical objects, hovering and slowly moving in the distance. The cameraman caught them clearly on video as they floated across the sky. The footage aired live, and people who were watching could see it happen in real time. This wasn't a quick flash or something easily dismissed. It stayed visible long enough for everyone to focus on it. Prophet Yahweh said he heard a voice in his head telling him when the UFOs would appear and where to look. But was this really the case? I mean, that is obviously very hard to believe. Could the objects have been balloons, drones, aircraft? Maybe, but they didn't seem to move like any of those things. The ABC crew didn't offer an explanation, and the event still gets passed around online with no solid answer for what actually showed up in the sky that day. On August 5th, 2009, during a live morning news broadcast on BBC Northeast, anchor Colin Briggs was delivering the day's stories when something strange appeared on the screen behind him. It was this wide shot of the Millennium Bridge in Newcastle, coming from the BBC's live webcam feed. Suddenly, this white streak of light zips across the frame, not falling downward, but shooting further into the sky before disappearing. The object was fast moving, but clear enough that viewers noticed, and people started recording it from their televisions and quickly shared the clips online. Some said it was a bird, a toy plane, but it doesn't really look like either of those things to me, and it didn't to Nick Pope, who is a former UK Ministry of Defence UFO investigator. He reviewed the slowdown footage and said it didn't look like a bird and that the movement was genuinely strange. The BBC later did a follow-up asking for viewer opinions, but never provided a final answer or any definitive explanation for what happened. On February 11th, 2013, during an afternoon broadcast on KRTV in Great Falls, Montana, during an episode of the Steve Wilkos Show, the emergency alert system suddenly cut in. Thank God, everyone said. Why was I watching the Steve Wilkos Show? Suddenly, though, viewers heard this voice calmly announce that the, quote, bodies of the dead are rising from their graves and attacking the living.
Civil authorities in your area have reported that the bodies of the dead are rising from their graves and attacking the living.
The message warned people not to approach these zombies and to wait for further instructions. It sounded pretty official and used the same tones and format as real emergency alerts. Within hours, similar hoax messages interrupted TV stations in Michigan, Wisconsin, and New Mexico. Even more strange, 2 days later, a radio station in La Crosse, Wisconsin played a recording of the hoax alert and accidentally triggered the EAS again, rebroadcasting the zombie warning to viewers who thought it was happening all over again. Investigators later confirmed that hackers had exploited a weak security on the emergency broadcast equipment, in many cases using default passwords that were still active. The hackers were eventually caught, but as for how exactly they did this, that's never been disclosed, probably for obvious reasons. On January 3rd, 2007, people in Australia were watching Mayday Head-On Collision, a documentary about air travel disasters, when something very weird happened. In the middle of the broadcast on Channel 7, the original audio suddenly cut out and was replaced with a looping clip from an old news story about a Halliburton convoy ambush.
Jesus Christ, help us all, Lord. Jesus Christ, help us all, Lord.
The audio was just a truck driver named Preston Wheeler screaming, "Jesus Christ, help us all, Lord," over and over. The audio kept repeating that same line for 5 solid minutes while the visuals from the documentary kept playing. In 2019, 9 News Australia did a story on a pub owned by a man named Ashtar Command who claims the place is haunted, and he had tons of late night security footage to prove it. Yeah, it wasn't just one incident. There's footage of chairs moving on their own, umbrellas opening up, doors slamming. The place is just bustling with activity even long after it empties out for the night. At one point, the news anchor tries to recreate pulling a chair out in one smooth motion like it seemed to do on its own in one piece of security footage, and he couldn't quite repeat it. The ground is just too uneven, so I have to imagine doing something like this with string would be really difficult. They also try to repeat the umbrella opening on its own and find that it would be next to impossible for someone to open the umbrella and not be caught on camera. The creepiest bit comes from an electrician who had a ghostly encounter at the pub while doing renovations though. He heard the small doors swinging right by the kitchen, followed by loud footsteps going up the stairs right next to them. He called out to the only other person in the pub at the time, who walked out from the kitchen. So they both went upstairs to check things out, only to find the top floor was totally empty. This is Kenneth Copeland. Now, if you've never heard of him, he's a televangelist who basically makes a living, a very good living, mind you, just screwing gullible, desperate people out of their money. He's actually told people in some of his sermons that if they only have 2 dimes to their name, to give 1 to the Lord, through his church, of course, all so that he can buy more private planes, jet skis, mansions, and God knows what else. He's pretty much the devil, and the irony of that shouldn't be lost on anyone, but somehow there are still people who fall for his utter BS. Here he is talking in tongues. Now, it sounds to me like he's imitating Portuguese, not, communicating with some holy higher power. Again, I don't get the appeal of this guy. He doesn't even look friendly. He's got those beady little eyes. He looks deranged even when he's smiling. Just a real uncomfortable aura around this guy. In 2019, NBC did a report on a ghostly photograph taken at a Baltimore eatery called Bertha's Restaurant and Bar. According to one of the owners, Laura Norris, the place has been haunted for decades, and she's communicated with the entity on more than one occasion. Apparently, the block that this restaurant is on is just full of ghosts. There's a ghost tour that starts at Bertha's, and one tourist captured this image right here. It looks a bit like some sort of ghostly figure reaching out of the 3rd floor window, and there is said to be a ghost that stalks that very floor, the spirit of a young girl who's often seen skipping through the hallway. In 1991, ABC aired a pretty wild and unsettling episode of 2020 that showed an exorcism happening live. The girl at the center of it was named Gina, and she was from Florida. According to the church, Gina had been dealing with demonic possession, so they decided to perform an exorcism to get rid of whatever was tormenting her. There were 2 priests involved. One was just called Priest A, the other was Reverend James Labar, who thought that airing the exorcism would give, quote, hope to those who may be afflicted. The whole thing is a very uncomfortable watch. Gina is seen shaking and screaming, and just possession aside even, she was clearly going through something. Even for people who believe in possession, it was a chilling watch, but for others, it looked more like she was going through some serious psychological distress. After the exorcism, Gina was sent to a psychiatric hospital for treatment. She was released later on, but after that, no one really knows what happened to her.
Starting off this countdown, we have the zombie broadcast. In February of 2013, an unknown hacker hacked a station in Montana, KRTV. This happened during the broadcast of the Steve Wilkos show. Now, what they did was hack into the channel's emergency alert system. Then they broadcast an alert saying that there was a zombie invasion happening in Montana. They said that zombies were leaving their graves and that some parts of Montana were already taken over by them. However, This warning was not taken seriously. Joke's on them though, because if it was real, they probably all would have died. Others thought that it was just an advertising for the show The Walking Dead. But no, it was just a random hacker trying to scare people and have fun. They also tried to hack into other television stations, but they were unsuccessful. In our 9th spot today, we have the poem. On February 26, 2022, Anonymous, as part of the cyber war declared to Russia, hacked a number of pro-Kremlin TV channels. They decided to broadcast a poem called No War. It's about the Russian-Ukrainian war. On top of that, they played footage of what was going on and played Ukrainian music. And recently, they did it again, which I will be talking about in a little bit. In our 8th spot today, we have the inappropriate viewing. In February of 2009, someone hacked KVOA, a channel in Tucson, Arizona. The hack occurred while they were airing the Super Bowl game between Cardinals and the Steelers. And they decided to replace the game with some adult content, if you get what I'm saying. It featured a couple getting it on. And what was funny is that many people sat through it thinking that it was a commercial. But then when there was nudity, they're like, okay, something's going on here, kids, cover your eyes. The hacker wasn't discovered until 2 years later. FBI figured out that it was Frank Gonzalez, who worked for Cox Cable. The irony on that name. In our 7th spot, we have the Russian TV services. Just recently, amidst the horror that's happening over in Ukraine, Anonymous decided to hack into Russian TVs and to show them the true devastation of Putin's Ukraine invasion. The group then shared videos of this deed onto Twitter. At first, they just targeted the channels on Russia 24, Moscow 24, Channel 1, Wink, and LVI. However, now all Russian state TV channels have been hacked. The broadcast ended with a message that read, "Ordinary Russians are against the war," and then called for Russians to oppose the attack on Ukraine. Now my thoughts are with anyone currently affected by this war. It is truly devastating. In our 6th spot today, we have the Max Headroom incident. Now this is a very famous broadcast interruption. On November 22nd of 1987 at 9:14, Chicago sportscaster Dan Roan was doing his segment when all of a sudden the screen just went black. 15 seconds later, a creepy figure appeared on screen. It was a man dressed in a rubber mask wearing sunglasses. After 30 seconds, the channel regained control of their broadcast. But 2 hours later, it happened again. This time to a different station who was playing Sherlock Holmes at the time. This time, the figure said some weird things, like he held up a glove and he said, "My brother is wearing the other one." Then he pulled it on saying, "But it's dirty. It's like you got blood stains on it." I don't know what's going on. To this day, the hacker has never been caught, and we still don't know why this person did what he did, and it's pretty creepy.
On August 19th, 1987, a man named Gary Stolman managed to get inside NBC's Burbank studio during the 4 p.m. news. At one point during the broadcast, he walked up behind reporter David Horowitz, pulled out a firearm, and forced him to read a bizarre statement live on air.
What is this? Let me see what it says.
Now, to say Gary Stolman was possessed here is a stretch, but he was in this eerily calm state considering the circumstances. He's almost robotic. It's very odd, and to the reporter's credit, he stayed pretty calm too, way more than I would have. He just started reading the paper, which was filled with wild claims about the CIA, mind control, and mental hospitals.
In 1981, by someone with connections at the CIA.
After the manifesto was read, Stolman just casually placed the firearm on the desk. Anchor John Beard quickly grabbed it, and security took Stolman into custody. Turns out, it wasn't even a real firearm. It was an unloaded BB. Very strange incident though. During a live call-in show on an Islamic TV channel, the hosts were doing a regular Q&A session when a woman called in saying she believed people had used black magic on her, and that a jinn, which is a type of supernatural being in Islamic belief, had possessed her. She said she'd been trying to fight it off with constant prayer, but it didn't seem to be working. At first she sounds calm, clearly distressed, but calm, and then it takes a turn. She starts making these weird animalistic noises, low growling, almost inhuman, and then a bit later she just breaks into this loud manic laughter that comes out of nowhere. It's the kind of laughter that makes the hairs on your neck stand up. Now, whether this woman was actually possessed or not, who really knows? She was definitely dealing with something though, unless she was faking the whole thing, but it doesn't really matter. The call is freaky either way. David Blaine's 2001 interview on GMTV is incredibly strange, so much so that it's kinda hard to watch, and if you were a super sheltered person who was genuinely freaked out by magicians and you tuned into this interview, you'd probably think David Blaine was possessed by some dark force that allowed him to perform his insane stunts and tricks. So Blaine came on the show to promote one of his stunts, but instead of answering questions like a normal person, he mostly just sat there silently staring. He barely blinked, barely moved.
I'm sure you're not going to tell me. Indeed.
And when he did speak, it was in this deep, monotone kind of drawl, and his answers were short. The host tried everything to break through, asked him normal stuff, asked him weirder stuff, even straight up said at one point, "Is this just part of the show?" Blaine didn't flinch, finally lifted his hand and showed an eye drawn on his palm, explaining in a flat, muffled tone, "It's protection from death."
Protection from death. Oh.
The interviewer later said it was one of the most awkward interviews of his career, and go figure. This clip is from a BBC documentary filmed in 1978, part of one of the most well-known paranormal cases ever, the Enfield Poltergeist. A reporter named Rosalind Morris visited the Hodgson family in Enfield, London, and interviewed them multiple times. This clip shows Janet Hodgson, who was just a kid at the time, speaking in this deep, harsh voice she claimed belonged to a spirit named Bill.
No.
Who's there?
Doctor.
The Hodgins said it started small. They'd hear knocking sounds, furniture would move around by itself, but then things started to get out of hand. Objects started flying across the room. Janet and her sister Margaret would get yanked out of bed. Janet started speaking in that raspy voice. Eventually, famed paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren showed up, and they backed the family up, saying the house was haunted by a poltergeist. Alright, one of the most uncomfortable and frustrating interviews I've ever seen is this Jim Carrey one. Oof. Now again, possessed in the traditional sense, no, but was he in some kind of state? Definitely. And it's hard to watch. It's very, very weird. So during a red carpet event at New York Fashion Week in 2017, Kat Sadler from E! News was trying to, just do her job, have a normal chat with Jim Carrey, who seemed to just be going out of his way to make things uncomfortable. "There's no meaning to any of this," he said. "I wanted to find the most meaningless thing that I could come to and join, and here I am." Sadler tried to keep things on track, mentioning that the party was celebrating icons, and then he's like, "I don't believe in icons, I don't believe in personalities. I believe that peace lies beyond personalities, beyond invention and disguise, beyond the red S you wear on your chest that makes bullets bounce off." And to really drive the existential dread home, he finishes off with, "This world is not our world, we don't matter." Okay, it's so pretentious. It's like a teenager who just had their first philosophy class and suddenly thinks they're just so above it all. "I know the truth, I see everything for what it really is." I don't know what Jim Carrey was going through at this point, but I think luckily he's become a bit more normal again, I think. I don't know. In 2012, a woman named Latoya Amons in Gary, Indiana claimed her house was infested with demons. She said her kids were getting possessed. One kid apparently levitated, another walked backwards up a hospital wall. And it wasn't just her saying these things. Multiple people, like doctors, nurses, police officers, DCS workers, claimed they saw really weird things happen. The case ended up getting so much attention that it reached the local police and the church, and that's when a priest named Father Michael Maginot performed multiple exorcisms, one of which was reportedly sanctioned by the Catholic Church itself. Zach Baggins from Ghost Adventures eventually bought the house and made a whole documentary about it called Demon House. He claimed the place was so dangerous, he had to demolish it.
Ever had that eerie feeling something is off with reality? Like a scene from The Matrix. Sometimes the real world seems to stutter or glitch, and it's all caught on live TV. From news anchors freezing mid-sentence to ghostly figures strolling through stadiums, these bizarre televised moments have left viewers wondering if we're all characters in some cosmic video game. Strap in, because today we're counting down real-life live TV glitches that are so freaky and unexplained they might just convince you we're living in a simulation. Imagine watching a live news report and suddenly the reporter's words turn into total gibberish. That's exactly exactly what happened during a CBS Los Angeles broadcast from the 2011 Grammy Awards. Viewers were stunned when reporter Serene Branson went from speaking normally to uttering a string of nonsensical sounds on live TV.
Well, a very, very heavy debatation tonight. We had a very Darrison.
She visibly panicked as she realized something was wrong, leading many to fear that she was having a stroke on air. Paramedics rushed to examine her, and thankfully, her vital signs were normal. It turned out Serene had suffered a complex migraine that mimicked stroke-like symptoms, causing sudden aphasia or speech impairment. In other words, her brain glitched, scrambling her speech. The clip went viral as a real-life Matrix moment, a healthy young reporter seemingly malfunctioning without warning. It was a scary sight, but also a relief when we learned it wasn't a true stroke. Still, for a few seconds of live TV, it felt like reality itself had briefly broken down. A famous weatherman suddenly freezes like an NPC caught in lag. On the Today Show in 2012, co-hosts Savannah Guthrie and Matt Lauer finished a silly dance joking about leaving room for the Holy Ghost between dance partners. That's when Al Roker, the beloved NBC weatherman, did the unthinkable. He stared directly into the camera, motionless, with a goofy grin for a full 17 seconds. He didn't blink, didn't move a muscle. It was as if someone hit the pause button on Al Roker. Roker later explained that it was a bit of deadpan humor, essentially a brain freeze challenge he did on purpose. The show's director egged him on to see how long he could hold the pose, and Al committed to the bit. Even so, watching it back, many viewers felt a chill. The moment looked so uncanny that it's now a classic glitch in the Matrix clip. During a live soccer match, a shadow person sprinted through the stands, and no one can agree if it was a glitch, a ghost, or just a camera trick. This incident happened at a stadium in La Paz, Bolivia, during a Fox Sports broadcast in 2014. In the footage, you see a dark, human-shaped figure running rapidly across the lower tier seats straight through the crowd, yet no one in the audience seems to react to it. Viewers at home were creeped out. Was it a ghost caught on live TV? Rational explanations soon emerged. Lighting snafu or video artifact, basically a technical glitch that made a real person's image smear across the screen. But that hasn't stopped wild theories. The clip went viral, with some saying the stadium is haunted or that we witnessed a Matrix running program acting up. What's freakier than one person glitching? How about two people glitching together? Twin sisters Paula and Bridget Powers from Australia gave an interview that left viewers' jaws on the floor. They were recounting a dramatic carjacking incident involving their mother, but it wasn't the story that stole the show, it was how they told it. The twins spoke in a mesmerizing stereo, often saying the exact same words at the exact same time during the live interview.
So we drop everything and we went running out the front. We seen Mum running out from the house up there.
At times, one twin would start a sentence and the other would finish it in perfect sync, as if they shared one mind. The effect was so uncanny that the clip went viral worldwide, and even Jimmy Kimmel invited them on his show out of sheer fascination. The sisters themselves just laughed it off, saying their brains think alike at the same time after a lifetime together. Indeed, Paula and Bridget have spent 51 years dressing alike, working together, and practically living in parallel. So, while it seems paranormal, it's likely just an extraordinary sibling bond. Viewers thought they spotted a shape-shifting reptilian on the news, but the truth was more technological. In an old CTV news clip that resurfaced online, a female reporter delivers the headlines when suddenly her eyes appear to glitch. During a blink, her eyes don't look human for a split second, they seem fixed and glazed over, almost like a doll's, or a computer-rendered image. Experts explained that it was a rolling screen repaint artifact from the broadcast. Basically, this was an analog TV signal glitch. On old antenna TV, if the signal degrades at the wrong moment, in this case when she blinked, part of the previous frame's data can briefly hold on for a second. The result? Her eyes open from a prior frame overlaid on her face while blinking, creating a creepy illusion that her eyes blinked but didn't close. Technical or not, it looked really freaky, like an NPC in a video game failing to load its textures. Even after hearing the explanation, some joked, "Sure, that's what they want you to believe."
In November of 2024, a local New York TV station was doing live helicopter coverage of traffic over the Hudson River. Same old stuff, until this strange glowing orb floats into the frame, hovering, changing color, then darting out of view. It starts out white and then turns blue and kind of semi-translucent before flying off. The anchor didn't react at the moment, but when the clip was shared online, people started talking about it. Some blamed lens flares, some guessed maybe it was a drone, others said a weather balloon, but the object didn't behave like any of those. It hovered, it changed color, then accelerated. Not even the FAA had an answer. What you're seeing here is news coverage in Laos of a mysterious phenomenon known as the Naga fireballs. Every year in late October, crowds gather along the Mekong River in Thailand to watch red balls of light float up from the water and then vanish into the night sky. They're called Naga fireballs, and locals say they're caused by a giant serpent spirit that lives in the river. The orbs don't make any noise, they come out of nowhere and they rise fast, sometimes hundreds in one night. There's been a lot of debate about what's really going on here. A Thai documentary once claimed it was just tracer rounds being fired by soldiers across the river in Laos. Others have blamed flare guns or some kind of flammable gas bubbling up from the riverbed, like methane or phosphine, but none of those explanations totally hold up. The balls don't behave like flares, and scientists pointed out that the conditions needed for gas bubbles to ignite like that don't really line up. In 2021, during a strict curfew, officials made sure there were no people out with flares, and the fireballs still showed up. This footage was taken in downtown Milwaukee in 2018 during a live broadcast. The news anchors had no idea what they were looking at. Fireworks? Aliens? They joked. It's very strange. This doesn't even look like your typical UAP footage. These things aren't moving in any sort of recognizable pattern. They're just floating in every which direction. They almost look like ghosts zipping through the air than any artificial object. And there are so many of them. It's really cool, but if I saw this in person, I'd be pretty unsettled. What do you all think of this one? If someone can enlighten me as to what this could be, please share your thoughts down below. This next one comes from a 2017 episode of the British talk show This Morning, featuring a couple and their possessed doll. The chair it sat on started to rock on its own several times throughout the interview.
That chair's beginning to rock. Look at that.
Who's doing that? Stop it.
The owner said that she and her husband had been walking by an antique store when they spotted a few old-looking dolls. The couple decided to buy a few of them because they were cheap and figured they might be able to flip them for more. Well, as soon as the dolls came home with them, strange things started to happen. They had one doll, the one they brought to the TV studio, sitting on the dresser in their room. Well, one morning the husband got up, hopped in the shower, and then suddenly felt this burning sensation on his leg.
And I looked down and there was a lot of scratches all over my knee.
They put the doll in their shed inside a plastic bin. Well, a couple days later, the wife went in and opened the bin, only to find that somehow the doll's necklace had been removed, even though it had been wrapped up tightly on the doll initially. And that night she woke up at 2 a.m. hearing this whooshing noise moving past the bed, almost like the rustling of clothing, or more specifically, a dress. There was nothing there. They ended up selling the doll. Did Pope Francis vanish into thin air on live TV? This was filmed back in April of 2020. The Pope showed up at the window above St. Peter's Square to bless people affected by the pandemic. Then he turned around and walked back inside, only before he was out of camera range, he suddenly just vanishes. You don't see him slowly disappear into the shadows. He's just there 1 second, then he's not. It's pretty bizarre. It's hard to find the original news segment online too, because it was taken down for some reason. In 2010, a Jamaican news station covered a story about a boy who claimed that he was being haunted by a duppy, basically a ghost. And the news team captured two strange incidents on camera. First, the boy is sitting in a chair talking about the strange experiences when all of a sudden he flies backward, as if something is pulling him. Then later in the segment, the boy claims to see the spirit standing close by watching him, and then he gets pulled again. At least That's what it looks like. Now, notice how one of his legs is in the air as he continues to move backward. And then when his mom grabs him, his legs like flip around like they're being grabbed at by someone, only we can't actually see anyone. It could be faked, but it is a damn good performance by this kid if it is. Alright, so at first glance, this just looks like some streaker running around a soccer field. If you're watching casually, you might even laugh it off, but the longer you watch, the weirder this footage is. This figure shows up from multiple camera angles, dashing through the crowd and along the edge of the field, and nobody reacts, like at all. No one turns their head, no one flinches, it's like they don't even see it. Then you notice this thing doesn't look fully solid, it's kind of see-through. There's a moment where it looks like it passes right through a group of people. Plus, this person actually ends up on the field, and if you know anything about stadium security, you know the second someone who's not meant to be there steps foot on the grass, they're getting tackled and dragged off. But here, nothing happens. In 2007, a live broadcast was interrupted by footage of a nuclear explosion. Messages calling out government lies suddenly appeared on Polish state TV in the 80s from a group of astronomers, and in 2002 Chinese cable broadcasts were hacked in multiple cities, showing footage that directly challenged the government. These are broadcast interruptions on live TV that terrified the public. In 2007, viewers of a Czech TV's Sunday morning show Panorama got a pretty disturbing surprise. The program usually just airs quiet, scenic shots from mountain resorts, basically tourism ads. But on June 17th, the feed from one of the cameras suddenly showed what looked like a small nuclear explosion going off in the countryside. It only lasted a few seconds and ended in static. This was subtle enough that some viewers didn't know if it was real or not, but the explosion was actually fake. It was CGI, planted by a local art collective. They'd physically tampered with the mountaintop camera to inject their pre-recorded video into the live broadcast. It's a creepy video. Really hits that analog horror kind of vibe before the analog horror genre was fully formed. Just this shot of a calm, scenic landscape with lazy elevator music playing in the background, and then this horrific explosion going off in the distance, totally offsetting everything. It all looks pretty convincing too. The group had pulled off other stunts before, but this one hit a nerve, especially with tourism businesses in the area who said it could scare visitors away. Czech TV considered legal action, but the group framed it as a kind of social experiment about media trust, forcing people to question what they were seeing on TV. In 1985, 4 Polish scientists pulled off something that looked more like a science fair project than a protest, but really rattled the government. These were astronomers, not hackers, and they used a ZX Spectrum home computer, some homemade circuits, and a transmitter to beam anti-regime messages right onto state-run TV in the city of Torun. Overlaid on the screen was text saying, "Solidarity, Torun. Boycotting the election is our duty. And solidarity, Torun. Enough price hikes, lies, and repression." All of it was signed with the logo of banned labor movement. Viewers at home were probably stunned to see the state's broadcast suddenly taken over by what looked like on-screen subtitles calling out the system. It didn't last long, but it did make a point. The 4 scientists were eventually caught and charged with owning an illegal transmitter and publishing what was labeled dangerous material. They received 4 months in jail and a fine. Put yourself in the shoes of some dude tuning into the Playboy channel in 1987. You know, you have a mullet, you just finished cruising the highway with your top down blasting Motley Crue on the radio, and the best way to top off the day is to tune in to the channel with maybe a brew or two. That was the 80s, right? Well, on this day, you're in the middle of your spicy movie when all of a sudden the screen gets overtaken by this black background with a simple white message quoting Bible verses telling people to honor the Sabbath and repent. That kind of kills the vibe. Well, the FCC eventually zeroed in on a guy named Thomas Haney, who worked as an uplink engineer for the Christian Broadcasting Network. Even though the message didn't say where it came from, investigators investigators noticed certain video fingerprints, subtle traces in the signal that hinted at the type of equipment used, and from that they connected it to CBN. The station denied being involved, of course. Haney swore he was innocent, and CBN said their gear couldn't have even pulled it off. They tried to recreate the hijack using the same setup and failed, but the government argued otherwise, saying that it was possible and that Haney had the access and technical know-how. Eventually, a jury convicted him on 2 counts, though he was cleared of interfering with another adult channel due to poor video evidence. He didn't serve time, but he did get probation, a fine, and community service. Gotta say, I'm no expert on things like this, but I don't think things would play out the same way today. I don't know. I don't think the dude would have gotten in nearly as much trouble today. Society's just, I don't know. We're a lot more prudish these days. They took their Playboy very seriously back in the 80s, it seems. In early 2002, cable TV viewers in several Chinese cities were suddenly interrupted by unexpected programming. It was a planned hijack by members of Falun Gong, a spiritual group that had been heavily suppressed by the Chinese government. The hijackers wanted to challenge the official version of a disturbing public event from the year before. They showed videos disputing state propaganda and calling for an end to persecution. Depending on the city, the hijack lasted anywhere from a few minutes to nearly an hour, and some reports even longer. These weren't digital hacks, they physically tapped into broadcasting equipment, which took some serious planning. A few months later, 15 people were arrested, and they were given very harsh prison sentences. In the years that followed, reports came out that several of those arrested had died while in custody. But those claims have been hard to verify because of how tightly China controls information. During the 2006 Lebanon War, Israel managed to break into Hezbollah's Al-Manar TV and broadcast their own message, a very direct threat aimed at Hezbollah's leader, Hassan Nasrallah. His face appeared on screen with crosshairs over it, followed by the sound of 3 loud pops and footage of Israeli airstrikes. It only lasted a few seconds, but the point was quite obviously not subtle. Fast forward to 2014 during the Gaza conflict, and this time the other side hijacked Israel's Channel 10 with a warning telling people to stay in their bomb shelters, mixed with graphic images from Gaza. Then again in 2016, people watching Big Brother on Israel's Channel 2 suddenly had their feed cut and replaced with another propaganda clip. That one lasted about 3.5 minutes, just long enough to get noticed before it was pulled. None of these takeovers were super polished, but they were meant to shake people up, not just jam the airwaves, but get into viewers' heads. When we're talking about broadcast interruptions that terrified the public, well, these are pretty much the textbook definition. Nobody knew how this happened. One viewer said he kept calling the station while it was happening, but no one answered the phones. There was no follow-up, no investigation. Channel 7 just brushed it off and moved on. This one is very eerie though. On October 2nd, 2014, Colette Provencher was delivering a live weather report on TVA News from the rooftop of the network's building in Montreal. As she talked, a bright green orb floated across the sky behind her. She didn't notice anything at the time, but viewers definitely did. The footage spread online, and people started arguing about what the glowing object actually was. Some said it was just a meteor. Others pointed out that the object looked way too big and wasn't moving like a typical shooting star. It also seemed to slow down mid-flight, which doesn't make sense for a meteor. The orb stayed visible for several seconds and didn't burn out like you'd expect. What are we looking at here? Good question. This clip was posted to Reddit by user Steve90,000, who wrote that on December 13th, 2024 at 5 p.m., ABC News caught an orb on video when in New Jersey investigating the drone situation. At the time, tons of people were spotting UAPs over the state. So what you're looking at here is just one of them. As for what it actually was, we still don't know. On April 27th, 1986, HBO viewers were watching The Falcon and the Snowman when their screens suddenly cut to black, and for about 5 minutes, a message appeared in bright white text on a color test pattern that read, "Good evening, HBO, from Captain Midnight. $12.95 a month? No way." The broadcast had been hijacked. The person behind it was John R. McDougall, a satellite engineer who was frustrated with HBO's pricing, which he felt was unfair to satellite dish owners who had to pay monthly fees for content that used to be free. McDougall later admitted that he'd used his own satellite equipment at a Florida transmission site to briefly override HBO's signal. He knew exactly how to aim his dish and transmit at just the right frequency to cut into their feed. Authorities launched an investigation, and within a few months, he was caught. He was fined and given probation, so yeah, the guy was identified, but I just had to bring this one up. The fact that this guy successfully interrupted one of the largest cable networks without immediate detection is pretty nuts. This is one of the most high-profile broadcast intrusions in US history. In 2021, Sam Hessler, a reporter for CBS 6, was doing a live morning segment from Greenbridge Cemetery in Saratoga County, New York. At the time, everything seemed perfectly normal. Nobody on set noticed anything unusual. It wasn't until later that day when a viewer contacted the station saying they'd seen something strange walking behind her during the broadcast. When the news team went back to review the footage, they spotted it too. Some sort of figure crossing the background. It almost looked like it appeared out of nowhere and disappeared just as quickly. The clip got passed around and people slowed it down to try and figure out what it was. In the slowed version, you can clearly see a shadowy form moving across the screen. Now, Greenridge Cemetery already has a bit of a spooky reputation. There have been stories of eerie things there over the years. You can imagine the details. Nothing super out of the ordinary for a cemetery. But to have something captured on live television like this, that hits a little different. The Reptilian conspiracy is one of the more out there theories floating around, but somehow it's got a pretty big following, partly thanks to supposed footage of it. The idea is that some of the world's most powerful people, your politicians, singers, actors, that they're not actually human, that they're instead these shape-shifting reptilian creatures wearing human skin suits as a disguise while secretly pulling the strings behind all the world's biggest decisions. What's kept this conspiracy alive for so long is what some claim to be video evidence. Over the years, live TV has supposedly caught these lizard people slipping up. There are clips of news anchors and politicians where their pupils briefly look like vertical slits instead of round human eyes. Sometimes their faces seem to glitch, momentarily revealing what looks like snake-like patches of skin underneath. Plenty of people have slowed these clips down, zoomed in, and picked apart the footage frame by frame, and then posted top 10 lists online talking about it. Well, I gotta talk about it. I know it, you know it, but that's because this is the wildest live broadcast hack in history, the Max Headroom incident, still unsolved. On November 22nd, 1987, on the evening news on WGN in Chicago, the screen suddenly cut to a man wearing a Max Headroom mask, a character from a TV show around that time. The man didn't say anything at first, he just stood there as this background behind him was spinning around, making strange movements, and you also hear a bit of a buzzing noise. The station quickly cut the feed, got back to the news. It only lasted about 20 seconds, but that wasn't the end of it. Just 2 hours later, during a broadcast of Doctor Who on the local PBS station, the same masked man took over again, and this time he started talking, mumbling phrases that made no sense, mocking TV personalities, even getting spanked with a fly swatter by someone off camera. It's a mix of emotions watching this footage. It's undoubtedly eerie, but you can't say there isn't humor in this too. The whole thing lasted about 90 seconds before the station finally managed to cut him off. The Federal Communications Commission launched an investigation, but they never caught the person responsible. To this day, no one knows who did it or exactly how they pulled it off. Why even? Breaking into live broadcasts like this is not easy. It would have required a lot of knowledge and skill. It's considered one of the weirdest unsolved broadcast intrusions ever.
We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the Wyoming hijacking. Now this is a pretty creepy hijacking that occurred in 2006 to a channel in Wyoming. Someone hacked an unnamed channel affiliated with ABC. Now reports don't say exactly what channel, so I guess they want some sort of privacy. Anyways, during the evening news they hacked and played a video of an animated head while text appeared by it. The text read things like, "You are ill, we just want to fix you, and you will see such pretty things." It's Pretty creepy, right? Well, it gets worse. The hacker also showed some strange images on the screen, accompanied by a strange tone. A number of people reportedly got sick after watching this. They ended up with headaches, nausea, even amnesia. Some even threw up after hearing this tone. Other people hallucinated upon hearing it. To this day, people don't know who was behind it, but some people believe that it wasn't a hacker behind this. Instead, they think it was some paranormal activity. In our fourth spot, we have the Israeli TV stations. In November of 2016, an unknown hacker hacked into Israeli TV stations, channels 2 and 10, during the evening news. In replace of that, they broadcasted messages mocking Israel and saying that God is judging the nation. In fact, at that time, Israel was facing terrible wildfires, so they claimed that this was done by God as a punishment. The hacker also transmitted images of Islamic religious areas and audio of an Islamic call to prayer and scriptures from the Quran. Now, this was aired the night before a vote to restrict Muslim prayer call. They wanted to ban it, citing noise pollution. So this hack was done to be like, God is angry at your decision and this vote, and it was done to try and get them to change their mind about it all. In our third spot, we have the Weather Channel hacking. I don't know who would want to hack a weather channel, but this individual thought it was a good idea. But they didn't really cause mischief. They just wanted to stop the channel from running its regular program, which is quite odd. So the hacking occurred on April 18th, 2019 from 6 a.m. to 7:39 a.m. Later, it was discovered that the hack was going to be a ransomware attack. So the hacker wanted the station to pay them money before they could resume airing. But that did not end up happening, so better luck next time. Moving on to number 2, we have the adult entertainment cable. This next person decided to hack into some adult entertainment programs like American Ecstasy and Playboy. This occurred in September of 1987. After hacking into it, they played religious messages, I guess to try and tell people that what they were doing and watching is sinful and that they need to turn to God for help. The hacker was later revealed as 38-year-old Thomas M. Haney, who worked for the Christian Broadcast Network. He was later charged for the hacks, but they were dropped because there was a lack of evidence. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the aliens. On November 26th of 1979, an alien hacked into Southern television during the 5 p.m. news. Now, viewers could see the newscaster, Andrew Gardner, but instead of hearing him, they were hearing an alien, or so the broadcast claimed. The voice they were hearing claimed to be an alien called Rilon, who was part of an alien group called the Ashtar Command. He said that humans needed to stop engaging in warfare and that every weapon on Earth should be destroyed. This should be done in order for the human race to live in peace, and only then could humans get to the higher realms of spiritual evolution. Sadly, the aliens' message didn't have a huge impact on viewers, but to this day, the hacker remains unknown.
An eerie figure caught on camera running around a soccer field, only no one saw it at the time. Did the ghost of Michael Jackson show up on an episode of Larry King? And did a woman possessed by a jinn call into a live TV show? These are spirits that were caught on live TV. Now, when you first start watching this, you may not think much of it. Looks like a streaker running around a soccer field, right? Or football field for the British viewers out there. Thing is, I'm not sure it's as simple as that. See, this person runs around for a long time. There are multiple angles here where we see this person running both through the audience and right on the edge of the field, and no one seems to react. And the more you look at this figure, the stranger it looks, in that it's not quite solid. It's semi-translucent and almost seems to run right through people. Strangest part for me though is when it actually looks to be running on the field. If someone just bursts onto a soccer field, they'd be escorted off in a matter of seconds. I mean, we've seen this happen with streakers before, and you know, of course, streakers don't look like semi-translucent ghostly forms like this. This is a very strange video. This live CNN broadcast has become pretty infamous for having possibly captured Michael Jackson's ghost on camera. Now, is Michael Jackson's spirit evil? Well, that depends where you fall on all the controversy behind him. That's a rabbit hole I will not be getting into, but this video is pretty interesting. So this was early July of 2009, less than a month after MJ had died, and they're doing an interview at Neverland Ranch when we see this. Okay, so it's a shadow, big deal. Well, there may be more to it than that. Slowing things down and zooming in on this shadowy shape more, and you'll notice that it kind of resembles that famous head tilted down Jackson pose, and if you look really closely, you'll see that this supposed shadow seems to cast its own shadow on the floor, almost like it's not a shadow at all that's being cast on the wall, more like a dark figure moving across the hallway. The other strange thing, who would have cast this shadow? We never see anyone actually walk by. Obviously shadows can be kind of iffy, but this one is a little bit spooky, given the context. Did a woman possessed by a jinn call into this live talk show? So this happened on an Islamic channel hosting a live call-in session. A woman calls in and shares that she believes people have used black magic against her, and that a demon or jinn has taken over her body. She talks about how she's doing her best to combat it through constant prayer, and throughout the call, she makes these really unsettling noises. She also starts to laugh maniacally at one point. Take a listen to this. Now, was this woman really possessed? Who am I to say? But even if she wasn't, there may have been something else going on with her, something still very real, which is equally sad and disturbing. Or it may have been a hoax. Either way, it's an eerie video. Creepy phone calls just get under my skin. It's something about the fact that I can't see the person on the other end of the phone. Back in 2021, news anchor Sam Hessler was doing live shots during the morning news from the Green Ridge Cemetery in Saratoga County, New York. Nobody noticed anything at the time until a viewer reached out to the station saying that he'd seen something walking behind her. Take a look. It passes by pretty fast, so here it is slowed down now. Now, Green Ridge Cemetery has somewhat of a reputation for being a spooky spot. Not only are there some really creepy statues of some very old graves here, but people have reported seeing some strange things. Not too out of the ordinary for a cemetery though, to be fair. Now that's a good question. Was there a ghost at an Albuquerque Dion's? And what is a Dion's even? Well, it turns out even a lot of Americans won't be familiar because Dion's are only found in 3 states, mostly in New Mexico. Anyway, this particular one might be haunted. Look at this. So all this stuff just slides off the counter seemingly on its own. No one is anywhere near it. You could say the stuff had just been sitting there precariously and fell off, but it doesn't really look like that. It looks like someone took their arm and swept everything off the table, only of course there's no arm in sight. Anyway, what do you all think of this one? This one sent a shiver down my spine. So back in 2018, CBS Colorado reported this really eerie story on the news. Police in Pueblo, Colorado had received a phone call just before 3:30 in the morning. The person on the other end hung up, so the police called back. There was an answer, but the 911 dispatcher could only hear static on the other end of the phone and the occasional inaudible muttering. Take a listen to this.
Hello?
Now, phone interference isn't uncommon, sure, but what makes this call extra chilling is that it was coming from a funeral home and cemetery. Police were sent out to the place, called Imperial Memorial Gardens, to check things out, but when they got there, they found that the funeral home was totally locked up. No lights were on, and there was nobody there. No one living, that is, and that just gives me the willies. A Thai model claims she's possessed by a flesh-eating spirit. NBC broadcasts the first ever on-air exorcism, and a UK man says a demon lives in his foot. Channel 4 airs his exorcism live. These are times people acted possessed on live TV. Back in 2016, a Thai model named Thipawan, who also goes by Pui, went on a morning talk show and claimed she'd been possessed by a spirit for over a year. She said it was a pop, which in Thai folklore is basically a ghost that feeds on human organs. As you can imagine, this makes for an awkward guest. At first she was pretty calm, just explaining how she picked up the spirit while on a trip to Wyoming, but halfway through the interview, something changes. Her voice, her mannerisms. She starts talking like she's not the one in control anymore, and the hosts quickly realize that something's wrong. The pop has taken over. They start trying to reason with the spirit, telling it to stop threatening people. Then one of the hosts pulls out a Buddha pendant. As soon as he holds it up, Pui completely loses it. She screams, flails, and recoils like someone threw acid at her. They end up putting the pendant around her neck, and then it just stops, like nothing happened. Shame she didn't think to do that before spending the year with an angry demon in her body. The whole thing went viral in Thailand. It's definitely one of the wildest things ever broadcast on Thai TV. That I know of. I don't watch Thai TV. In 1971, NBC aired something that had never really been done before on TV, an exorcism. Most audiences back then didn't even know what an exorcism was. I mean, sure, exorcisms had been around for a very long time, but they hadn't seeped into pop culture the way they have now. This was still 2 years before The Exorcist even came out, so to say audiences were shocked by this would be an understatement. The 6-minute segment documented the experiences of Edwin and Marcia Becker, a couple living in Chicago who claimed their home was haunted. Reporter Carol Simpson led the piece, which opened with an interview where the Beckers described unexplained activity in the house.
Cabinet doors were closing, doors were opening, doors were closing.
This past week, they said they were awakened by the sound of a woman crying. It came from the dining room, but there was no one in the house but themselves.
I hated to think of what it was, Edwin went on to say during the interview. After the Catholic Church declined to help them, the Beckers contacted the independent spiritualist church in Chicago. The exorcism was performed by Reverend William Darrell Davis and Joseph DeLuise, a medium. Everyone in the house, including the news crew, was asked to wear crucifixes for protection. At one point, Reverend DeLuise entered a trance and claimed to channel the voice of a spirit, an old woman who spoke through him, saying something about a lock combination.
Remember, the combination. Why did it concern you? It's important to me. Why have you stayed here?
During the ritual, a strong gust of wind blew through the room, shaking the blinds, although that apparently happened off camera. The team also used a mirror, offered communion to the spirit, and spread blessed salt throughout the house. The broadcast ended with Simpson stating that the house had been quiet for several days since. In 2005, Channel 4 in the UK aired a show called The Exorcism, where they attempted a real exorcism on live television. A lot of viewers found it highly disturbing. The subject was a man named Colin, though, who claimed he was possessed by something that lived in his right foot. Apparently, this demonic foot spirit caused him to drive dangerously fast without being able to stop himself. That sounds like one of the worst excuses in court, but anyway, he tried everything else apparently, so Channel 4 decided to televise The Exorcism to see if it would help. The network made a big deal out of this, calling it a scientific experiment and even bringing in psychiatrists and, of course, church officials to answer phones afterward in case viewers got freaked out. And they did. Over 4,000 people called in after the broadcast. It ended up being one of Channel 4's most called about shows. During the actual exorcism, Colin didn't exactly start levitating or vomiting pea soup, but he did look tense and disturbed. And then after a bunch of prayers, he suddenly said, "That was the most relaxed deliverance I've ever had." So take from that what you will. If anyone has more information on this airing though, like if you actually saw it live, please share your thoughts down in the comments. Back in the early 90s, ABC's 2020 aired a segment that freaked a lot of people out as well. It featured a teenage girl named Gina being exorcised by a group of Pentecostal ministers. It was filmed and broadcast nationwide in 1991 for millions to see. The footage is pretty distressing. Gina was clearly not in a good way, eyes rolling, voice growling, body convulsing. She screams, jerks violently, and starts shouting things in this deep, raspy voice. According to the ministers, she was possessed by several entities, two of which were named Zion and Minga. Ministers surrounded her, prayed, and yelled for the entities to come out. Eventually, everything settles down, and the demons are supposedly literally exorcised. Whether you believe in this or not, the footage is kinda disturbing. From what I can tell, this was not a staged segment. Even if it was just emotional overload or religious hysteria, it's sad watching a young girl go through something like this, all in front of cameras too. There's never been an update on Gina either. She ended up in psychiatric care soon after this segment aired. As for what she's up to now, if she's okay, we don't know.
This one isn't a glitch in the video, it's a glitch in the broadcast itself, and it's straight up like something out of a techno thriller. In November 1987, Chicago sportscaster Dan Roan was doing the nightly news when suddenly the signal hijacked. TV screens went black for a second, and then viewers were suddenly staring at a bizarre figure. Someone in a Max Headroom mask bobbing around in front of a swiveling metal background. No sound, just 30 seconds of this super creepy masked intruder. Engineers managed to regain control on that channel, but it wasn't over. About 2 hours later, during a Doctor Who episode on another station, Max Headroom hacker struck again, this time with audio. The masked person spoke in distorted garbles, laughed, moaned, even exposed their bare behind to the camera while being spanked with a fly swatter. Yeah, it was really weird. After about 90 seconds, the pirate broadcast ended. Viewers and station officials were completely baffled. Who was that? How did they break into major TV station signals? The Federal Communications Commission launched an investigation, but to this day, the culprits have still never been caught or identified. Even decades later, watching the Max Headroom incident on YouTube will give you a serious case of the heebie-jeebies. Somebody has the chance to have the best deathbed confession of all time. Imagine your grandfather, you're saying your final goodbyes, and he's like, I was Max Headroom. That would be crazy. When a news crew went looking for ghost stories, they might have gotten more than they bargained for. In 2021, WNYT News Channel 13 in upstate New York did a live report from the Greenridge Cemetery as part of a Halloween segment. Reporter Sam Hessler was on air in the pre-dawn hours, walking among the tombstones while a guide shared spooky historical tales. The broadcast went smoothly until viewers at home noticed something on their screens that even the crew on site missed. In the background, behind Sam, a misty white figure seemed to drift between the graves. It was brief and subtle, a flicker of what looked like a person or a fog moving fast. After the live shot, one astonished viewer alerted the station, and Sam herself was stunned reviewing the footage. She hadn't seen anything in person. WNYT later acknowledged the eerie moment, assuring folks the clip was unedited and truly aired live. The internet, of course, lit up with ghost caught on live TV posts and theories. Some paranormal enthusiasts called it one of the best accidental ghost sightings on a news broadcast, evidence of a spirit roaming the cemetery. Skeptics countered that it could have been a camera glitch, a passing car's headlights reflecting, or even a stray piece of insect or dust close to the lens creating a blur. The station's own write-up teased it as something almost too crazy to be real and encouraged viewers to watch and decide for themselves. You're watching HGTV and suddenly an emergency alert pops up warning that the end of the world is here. What do? That nightmare scenario actually happened to some TV viewers in Southern California in September 2017. Without warning, regular programming was interrupted by the emergency alert system. The typical alert banner scrolled, but then things got truly terrifying. A booming male voice came on and proclaimed, "Realize this, that in the last days extremely violent times will come." Imagine hearing that out of the blue on a Thursday morning and you're just trying to love it or list it. Understandably, people freaked out. It sounded like a prophecy of an imminent apocalypse or some wartime broadcast. As dramatic as it was, this turned out not to be the work of pranksters or an alien overlord, but simply a technical glitch and incredibly bad timing during a routine test of the emergency alert system. In short, the system glitched out and aired a fire and brimstone sermon by mistake. Cox and Spectrum cable customers heard what sounded like a doomsday warning, but it was just Pastor Chuck Swindoll quoting the Bible, 2 Timothy 3:1, on an FM station. Both the cable company and the FCC confirmed it was an error, not a hack, but not before scaring the heck out of viewers. In the middle of a live US Congress debate, viewers suddenly saw something Russian. In January 2017, politics junkies watching a C-SPAN online feed got a strange surprise. The feed, which was showing a live House of Representatives session, abruptly switched to Russia Today, the Kremlin-funded news channel, for about 10 minutes. Given that this occurred amid intense news about Russian cyber interference, many thought C-SPAN had been hacked by Russians in real time. C-SPAN quickly investigated and put out a statement. They didn't believe it was a hack, but rather a routing technical error. The leading theory is that some glitch caused the RT feed to literally overlap and replace the C-SPAN feed on their site. In simulation terms, it's like two different programs momentarily cross-wired. The timing, however, was almost comical. It happened just hours after a power outage oddly halted a Senate hearing about Russian hacking. Even Waters, whose speech was interrupted, remarked on the curious timing and demanded a clear explanation. Seeing Moscow news pop up in a US government broadcast felt like a scene from a spy movie, or a reminder that the simulation has a twisted sense of humor. Our final glitch was literally one word caught in an endless loop, and of course, that word was Russia. Also in January 2017, I guess a bad month for TV gremlins, MSNBC's show Hardball experienced a freaky moment. Journalist Dave Ignatius was talking to host Chris Matthews about, ironically, Russian interference in US politics. He said the word Russia and bang. The screen flickered and started repeating Russia, Russia, Russia over and over in a feedback loop. Chris Matthews looked confused as the glitch kept going for several seconds, echoing Russia in a creepy cadence until the control room cut to commercial. Given the climate at the time, Twitter exploded with jokes that Moscow hackers or the Kremlin Matrix had struck again, but most likely this was just a bizarre technical malfunction. Perhaps a failing satellite feed or encoding error that caused a few seconds of audio/video to loop. The fact it looped that particular word on that particular topic, well, that was gold for conspiracy lovers and also late night comedians. MSNBC assured it wasn't intentional and nothing nefarious was found. If we do live in a simulation, it definitely has a flair for dramatic irony.